Hello, I'm Nima Orazani. I speak to you as an Iranian in diaspora, based in Canada, and as a scholar of social and political psychology. I'm here to shed some light on the uprising unfolding in Iran and to offer first-hand insights into Iranian society, both inside the country and across the diaspora. Before anything, let me be clear about my position. No account of political life or events comes from nowhere. Every account is situated, shaped by location, experience, and the moral and theoretical lenses we bring to the situation. My lens is a critical one. I apply it to Western liberals and progressives, and I apply it without hesitation to my own community, especially Iranians in the diaspora. Today, I'm addressing you if you identify as liberal, progressive, or leftist. These traditions are not identical, but they share a moral vocabulary: human rights, anti-authoritarianism, solidarity with oppressed peoples, and so on and so forth. My argument is simple. If those commitments mean anything, they must not collapse the moment Iran enters the frame. If you have followed Iran even minimally, you know that collective action, there is not an anomaly. Workers, teachers, pensioners have organized strikes and protests repeatedly. But some movements have been broader and more widespread. For example, the student movement of 1999, the Green Movement of 2009, the nationwide protests of Day 2017 and Aban 2019, the Woman, Life, Freedom uprising, and now the current wave, which is unfolding with a scope and intensity that demands moral clarity, no moral hesitation. I will assume something else as well, that anyone who calls themselves progressive understands the basic architecture of Iran's state. Iran is not a democracy with imperfections. It is an instance of electoral authoritarianism, the ritual of elections deployed as political theater designed to signal legitimacy to the world while real power remains concentrated in a coercive, unaccountable structure. Yet, there are nuances, I know that. But I'm not going to talk about those nuances because I don't have enough time here. If you don't know this, which is the baseline fact about Iran, your politics as a progressive is not progressive actually. It is uninformed and dangerously so. The recent uprising, by many accounts, ignited with deep dissatisfaction in the bazaar and rapidly spilled into the wider society. In other words, this is not a single class speaking. It is a society erupting, the entire nation. You would see the breadth of that eruption if you were allowed to, but you are not. The Islamic Republic has severed channels of communication with the outside world. It is a political tactic, and for me, it is also personal. I have not been able to speak with my family as many of my Iranian fellow. So, the question Western liberals ask is predictable. What stance should we take as liberals, progressives, leftists? My answer is equally predictable. If human rights is more than a performance, you take the stance you claim to take everywhere else. You stand with people being shot, beaten, disappeared, tortured, and executed for the crime of refusing submission. If you have supported Palestinians against genocide, and you should have, all of us should, then the same moral reflex must apply here. The burden of proof is not, and this is very important, the burden of proof is not on the victims to be pure enough for your solidarity. It is on you to be consistent enough for your own ethics. And yet, hesitation appears. Not because the principles are unclear, but because propaganda and superficial readings create obstacles. Let me name and talk about several. First, the blackout itself. The internet shutdown is not incidental. It is designed to prevent documentation, to delay verification, to disrupt coordination, to isolate citizens, and to make mass violence easier while the world remains uncertain, distracted, or conveniently waiting for more information. When a regime turns off the lights, it is rarely to reduce harm. It is to commit harm with fewer witnesses. Second, the manufactured narrative of leadership. If you consult, for example, Al Jazeera, the news network, or other outlets sympathetic to the Islamic Republic, you may hear that communications were cut to stop Reza Pahlavi's calls for protest. For those unfamiliar, Reza Pahlavi is the son of Iran's last monarch, overthrown in 1979. But the claim that these uprisings are caused or led by him is not credible. A movement does not erupt because a figure abroad posts a message. People do not step into bullets because a distant voice told them to. What has happened instead is something we recognize in political psychology. And what is that? When things fall apart, people try to take over the story. Some individuals ride the waves of collective anger and try to install themselves as its spokesperson or even its leader. Certain diaspora outlets such as Iran International and Manoto, which ceased producing programming after financial difficulties, along with right-wing and far-right networks, have amplified this storyline. But even if, for the sake of the argument, we accept the regime's claim that the blackout aims to block Pahlavi's influence, even if we accept this, the regime still condemns itself. Why? Because the Islamic Republic's own revolution succeeded through a leader communicating from exile, Khomeini from France. The principle is not complicated here. Authoritarian power reserves freedoms for itself that it denies for others. that is not an argument. It is hypocrisy dressed as a statecraft. Third, the monarchy situation or the monarchy question. Perhaps the most common liberal stumbling block is this one. Doesn't monarchy contradict democracy? Didn't the West become democratic by moving beyond monarchy? The question is legitimate, but it is often poorly applied to Iran because it assumes diaspora optics are the whole picture. What you are seeing outside Iran is not a faithful portrait of what is happening inside Iran, especially under blackout conditions. Inside Iran, some people chant Reza Pahlavi's name, but they do not represent the nation. Even among those who chant Pahlavi, motivations diverge. Some are committed monarchists, some are politically desperate and grasping for any recognizable symbol, some are chanting purely to antagonize the Islamic Republic. And beyond them, and that's important, beyond them, there are many, many protesters who reject monarchy outright and envision futures that have nothing to do with royal restoration. In the diaspora, monarchists often appear dominant because they are loud, highly mobilized, and frequently aligned with far-right styles of politics that reward volume and aggression. But visibility is not legitimacy. Do not mistake amplification for representation. Iran is ethnically, culturally, and politically diverse. We have Turks, Kurds, Lor, Baluch, Turkmen, and more and more and more. Each with distinct histories, grievances, and political, more importantly, political imaginaries. Treating one faction as the Iranian people is a categorical error, like mistaking one party for an entire polity. If you want to demonstrate solidarity without being absorbed into monarchist spectacle, you can have the woman life freedom slogan and symbols signaling support for the uprising rather than allegiance to any single diaspora faction. Fourth, the spy excuse. The Islamic Republic and its media ecosystem invokes a familiar script. Israeli spies are among the protesters, and therefore they have the right to shoot anyone. Therefore, the mass killing is justified. Even if we grant, again, for the sake of the argument, that spies exist among demonstrators in Iran, the moral reasoning remains obscene by the Islamic regime. The response to espionage is targeted investigation, not collective punishment. We have heard similar logic used to rationalize atrocities elsewhere, including against Palestinians. If you, as progressives, reject it then, you cannot accept it now without abandoning your own moral grammar. Moreover, a deeper question should be asked here. If a society were politically satisfied, if civic life were protected, if dignity of people were respected, would spies have any power to ignite nationwide revolt? No, uprisings are not imported like contraband. They are produced by sustained humiliations, economic dispositions, collapsing public goods, surveillance, the absence of civic liberties, and the constant invasion of private life by a state that treats its citizens as suspects. And history teaches another patterns as well. Authoritarian regimes routinely insert provocateurs and agitators into crowds to generate violence that can then be used as a pretext for repression. This tactic is neither new nor subtle. Anyone who claims political sophistication, which usually progressives do, should recognize this. Fifth, the Israeli flag seen at some diaspora demonstrations. Yes, it appears. And it is politically grotesque. But it is not representative of Iran inside. Much of it comes from an extremist diaspora segment that does not enjoy broad support within the country precisely because of its extremism. The overwhelming majority of Iranians inside Iran did not want the 12 days war, the illegal invasion of Israel to Iran. They wanted life, ordinary life, without a regime that turns citizenship into captivity. Again, part is not the whole. A loud minority is not the people. Sixth, the mosque questions, where Western liberals often reach for reflexive labels instead of contextual analysis. When a mosque is attacked and you immediately declare Islamophobia, you may feel morally clean, but you may also be analytically careless. In Iran, some mosques are not experienced merely as religious spaces. They have been used as sites of regime infrastructure. Historically, many mosques have hosted Basij centers, an ideological enforcement apparatus that has policed women, raided private gatherings, conducted night patrols, searched vehicles, and penetrated citizens' private lives under the cover of morality. In that context, places that appear sacred in abstraction can be entangled on the ground in the machinery of coercion and suppression and oppression. Recognizing that entanglement is not bigotry, it is political literacy, it is resistance. What I'm rejecting here is lazy interpretation by some leftists, progressives, or liberals. If you refuse to learn context and default to slogans, you are not protecting the vulnerable. You are performing virtue while misunderstanding power. Seventh, the sanction diversion. Another move that exhausts me. It makes me mad. There are people, groups, and media outlets, including Al Jazeera, who continuously redirect attention away from the Islamic Republic's crime toward Western sanctions, as if sanctions are the whole story. Let's be accurate. Economic sanctions can inflict serious harm, and it should be named. But it is also manipulated. Sanctions did not invent Iran's economic crisis. They intensified, I repeat, they intensified structural conditions that were already present. Systemic corruption, rent extraction, patronage network, and creation of a privileged class insulated by insider access and impunity, often capable of profiting even from sanctions. This was in place. All of these were in place before sanctions. And beyond corruption, the state, beyond corruption, the systemic corruption, the state pours vast public resources into institutions tasked with social engineering. What does that mean? It means promoting regime-approved religious education and enforcing a prescribed lifestyle regardless of what citizens want. Sanctions did not build that architecture. The regime did. Sanctions do not pull triggers. The regime does. So yes, sanctions can be unjust and harmful. Economic sanctions, not any sanction. But if you cannot locate, as progressive, if you cannot locate primary responsibility in Iran's political structure, and instead you cling to sanction as a convenient narrative that displaces accountability and responsibility, your politics is shallow. It is a way of avoiding confrontation with authoritarian violence where it actually operates. Finally, a word about the diaspora left, because critique must also face inward. In Canada, the United States, and Australia, the three countries I have lived in, at least my experience is that I watched Iranian liberal and left circles repeatedly fail to build an organized, coherent infrastructure of action. Too often, the left has not produced a compelling public discourse capable of filling the vacuum when regimes weaken and narratives become contested. And this is not only the problem for the left in Iran. This is a global issue. The rise of far-right populism is partly enabled by the left's failure to articulate and generate an alternative that is both principled and socially resonant. This is precisely why consistent progressive solidarity matters now. Because fragmentation is not neutral. It becomes an opening for louder, cruder, more dangerous voices and forces. If you have been silent because of these complexities and the confusion that ensued, you don't have that excuse anymore, by my explanations. At least I think. You don't get to build your identity on human rights and then go quiet when a dictatorship begins a massacre in the dark. What can you do? Do the minimum that morality requires, at least. Use your platforms, online and offline, to circulate information. Protect the narrative from being hijacked by distractions. Not spies, not sanctions, not diaspora theatrics. Keep the center of gravity where it belongs. The Islamic Republic's violence and massacre, its repression, its responsibility, its accountability. Share this video. Speak about it, even briefly. Contact your representatives. Ask them to document these atrocities and ask them to press Iranian officials for accountability. A state that murders its citizens cannot be treated as normal, not by the world and not by anyone who still calls themselves progressive. And now I will end where every serious analysis at these situations must end, with the dead or killed. At this very moment that I'm speaking to you, there are at least more than 3,200 innocent protesters killed by the Islamic regime. Some estimate says it's between 6,000 to 12,000. And we don't know the exact number. Why? Because there is a blackout by the government. The people being killed by the Islamic Republic are not numbers. They are not unverified reports. They are not content for the news cycle. They are human beings, young and old, most of them young, some of them kids under 18, who walked into the street, with nothing but courage and were answered with bullets, batons, prisons, and gallows. Many will never get justice. Some families will never even get the truth that how their loved ones got killed and who did it. Some will be forced to bury their loved ones in fear and silence in a place far from their homes and cities, watched by the very system that I saw pictures of people who were buried unknown. The loved ones will be waiting for them maybe forever. And this is what the blackout is for, to make the killing easier, to make the executions quieter, to keep you uncertain long enough for the regime to finish its work. So I'm asking you to hold one image in your mind. A mother waiting for a message that never arrives. A wife looking at hundreds of bodies to maybe find her husband. A father searching hospitals and morgues. A friend refreshing a dead internet connection, praying for one sign of life. This is what your hesitation protects. This is what your both sides reflex enables. If you believe in human rights, then act like it. Say their names when you can. Share the evidence. Push your representatives. Refuse every distractions and keep the focus where it belongs, on the Islamic Republic's responsibility for this horrific massacre. Let's keep victims' names and memories. Let's keep our heroes' name and memories alive. Every single one.